So our first speaker is Brian Lazar. Brian's been working in snow and avalanches for a couple of decades now as a mountain guide, as a researcher. He has a master's degree from the University of Colorado, and most recently working as the deputy director of the Colorado Avalanche Information Center, which he's been doing for 9 years now. Brian's going to kind of take us through some of the events of this March cycle. I'm very excited to hear his talk, and hopefully you will all enjoy it as well. Please welcome Brian Lazar.
Thanks. This headset working? Okay. So we had a few avalanches in March. I want to cover a couple of them. I want to start by confessing that putting this kind of talk together was really daunting and just a little bit intimidating. There were so many pieces to this avalanche cycle that deciding what to focus on was really difficult. I decided to kind of take you guys through a timeline, a sequence of events as they appeared to us on the ground, and what our staff of about 20 people had to deal with this statewide event. I want to apologize up front if your favorite avalanche is not in this slide deck. There's just too many to put in here. However, that said, if you feel like we are missing something, please email, you can email me. We do want to try and get as complete a data set as we can. And so if there's things that you think like we're missing or things you came across this summer, please let me know. I want to acknowledge that this was very much a team effort. This information was compiled by everyone at the Avalanche Center, including reviews of this slide deck and this talk, and everyone in this room who shared data, photos, videos, both as events were unfolding and throughout the summer as you came across humongous debris piles. So I want to start by kind of putting last year into context. There's been a lot of talk about this being an epic record-setting snowfall year. I would like to debunk that here. It was a good year. This is a graph of daily snow water equivalent on the y-axis there in inches, and then as we move through the water year, which starts on October 1st and ends on September 30th, that blue line at the top is the maximum over the 30-year time frame from 1981 through 2010. Red's the minimum, and green is the median over that time frame. The dark blue line was the water year last year. So it was a good year. We started in early October with some snowfall that stuck around. That gave us our basal weak layers that we're all familiar with living in Colorado. Then you can see for a good chunk of the early winter, we just tracked pretty much near average snowpack depth. We didn't really start to depart from average until we got really consistent snowfall kind of starting late January and into February. Now, March itself was a bit of a different story. So in many places, this was record-setting precipitation for this storm event. 74 out of the 117 snow-tell sites in the state of Colorado recorded either their most precipitation in the month or second most. That's about 2/3 of our station did have record or near record snowfall in just the first 2 weeks of March. And that gave us a peak snowpack depth of SWE statewide of April 5th, which is right near long-term average of April 7th. But to put this into context, I wanted to compare it to a similar year, which is the winter of 2010 and 11, which is a really good snowfall year, but no one was talking about that as breaking records. In fact, we had a later peak due to some late spring snowstorms, and if you remember, heavy snow continued into May of that year. But we actually peaked a little bit higher in spring of 2011 than we did in this last spring. I was getting constant emails and getting stopped in the grocery store throughout the summer, and people were reporting, oh my God, there is 2,000% of average snowpack on the ground? I'm like, yeah, but it's June 30th, and so average is 1/100th of an inch, and so if we've got 2 inches on the ground, that is 2,000% of average, but it's a little misleading. Our peak was only 133% of peak median. So this is a series of snow-tell sites throughout the state of Colorado, starting in the north, which is probably the snowiest place in the state, the Tower Station north of Steamboat, all the way down through the south, including Wolf Creek Pass and Slumgullion. You can see although they've got different amounts, they all tell a similar story. We had early October snowfall, and that set the stage for this hallmark cycle because it did build weak layers near the ground. Whoops. We started to get really consistent snowfall starting in late January, and that really increased our snowpack. We started to climb above average, and then this is when it all went down. in these first 2 weeks of March here, when you can see steep inclines in the snow water equivalent graphs. This is what our snowpack looked like just prior to the loading event. So we're sitting pretty good before the snowpack, before these storm events started, 103 to 121% of median. Everywhere in the state had a relatively deep and strong snowpack for Colorado. We had some of the deepest areas were sitting at over 3 or even 4 meters of snow on the ground. And so what we were seeing at this point of the year was very few human-triggered avalanches breaking on basal weak layers. Most avalanches were breaking on mid-pack weak layers. There were some notable exceptions. You can see the northern mountains were thinner than the snowpack in the central and southern mountains just because of the storm tracks. And portions of the Sawatch Range were also thinner. But in general, people were not triggering avalanches breaking on deeper weak layers. And in these really deep snowpack areas that had 3+ meters of snow on the ground, we were starting to not worry about them at all unless we got a massive loading event. Avalanche danger right before this cycle started sat at moderate pretty much statewide except for the Steamboat and Flat Tops, which is at low. Persistent slab avalanches was the only problem listed in all backcountry zones. You can see here we did recognize the potential for unlikely, very large persistent slab avalanches to occur. But we, again, thought we were going to need something of epic proportions to get these things to break on deep weak layers in our deepest snowpack areas. This is a map created by the National Weather Service, which just shows snowfall in inches just in the first week of March alone. We're looking at 2.5 to 7 feet of snow for most mountain areas, 2 to 5 inches of water. In the deepest portions of the central mountain, which you can see by the lighter colored pink bullseyes, we're over 9 feet just in the first 7 days of March. And we started to see avalanches right away. So I'm going to show you a bunch of these bullet points on the left. I pulled information from the nearest snow tell related to the avalanches that are on the slides. So HST is the amount of water that's fallen since the beginning of these storm events. And then at the bottom bullet is the total percent increase in snow water equivalent snowpack on the ground. So these are all near Loveland Pass. We start to issue our first avalanche warning on March 2nd, and we start to see some big avalanches running out of fairly small paths. So these were impressive, but not huge, largely due to the terrain. But these are running R4, relative scale R4, and it started to get us thinking, like, if this keeps up, what's going to happen in big paths with deep snow? By March 3rd, we started to find out. This was some of our higher profile avalanche activity because it's on I-70, but we started to see avalanches running onto the open highways. Our backcountry avalanche warning has expanded now to 6 of 10 zones. We have our first avalanche fatality during the storm cycle where a solo backcountry skier was killed near Trout Lake. We have 2 of these avalanches run on I-70, one at about 8 in the morning, another one at 5. This is what cleanup looked like. You can see here we're approaching a 17% increase in total snow water equivalent at the nearest snow tell site. I want you to pay attention to those increases in snow water equivalent numbers because they might be a useful metric for us moving forward. We start to see our first size 4 destructive avalanches in the state. Dozens of avalanches run on the US 550. This closes 550 and it will not open again for 18 days. This ran into Gothic. This is data from Billy Barr, Rocky Mountain Biological Laboratory. We're at 3.4 inches of water at this point, an 18% increase in total snow depth, and we've got avalanches running into Gothic and doing damage to cabins. This quote I thought was awesome from Billy. Of note, this was 41 years to the day of the avalanche that happened in this spring, both on March 3rd. We had other size 4 avalanches on Whetstone. I'm going to show you a series of these maps which shows avalanche activity throughout the state. The really small pink circles are size D2s. The blues are D3s, reds are D4s, and the big black circles are D5s, just to give you an overview of what was happening. These are not cumulative slides. This is just what happened on this day. So we've got avalanches running onto open roads. We get more D4 avalanches in the central mountains. This is right near Twin Lakes. 16% increase in total snow water equivalent. We've got a D4 avalanche running off Perry Peak. We've got more powder clouds running into 10 Mile Canyon, which the media is loving. A bunch of avalanches near Aspen. So we've got paths extending near the old Independence town site. We've got stuff running near Ashcroft, crossing the Valley Fours, nearly missing some residents there. More D4 avalanches off Gothic Mountain. Some of them are the biggest that have been seen off portions of that east face. And we put a massive amount of debris onto the highway in US 550. This was a D4 avalanche that ran in the Portchester slide path in the Maroon Bells Wilderness. You can see this is a 24% increase in snowpack. This is way out the end of Highlands Ridge as you go towards Hunter Peak. So this is a D4 avalanche early in the cycle. This is not the last time we will hear of avalanches running off this particular ridgeline. This is some of the carnage that was left on US 550. So they are not making opening the road much easier. They're continuing to put more and more snow onto the highway. Again, this is really deep and 1,100 feet on center, 1,100 linear feet is covered just from these particular events. We get a break in the storm on March 5th, and we're able to do some helicopter avalanche reduction work. This is the Berthoud slide path, which sits above I-70 just east of the Eisenhower-Johnson tunnels. You can see we got some pretty good results here. This covered all lanes of the interstate and closed it down for a good chunk of the day, and a lot of unhappy motorists. We moved over on this same day onto US Highway 40. This is between the town of Empire and Berthoud Falls as you're heading up towards Berthoud Pass. This is the Disney slide path. And again, here you can see we put snow on the road. This is the first time we've put snow on the road in quite some time, and I'll touch on that a little bit later in the talk. And more reduction work on US 550 puts more snow onto US 550. So we are not even in the process of beginning cleanup, we are still making messes. March 6th, heavy snowfall returns. We start to see avalanches running size 4 in even the deepest snowpack areas in the West Elk Mountains. This is White House near Marble. Amazingly, Mike here was able to catch this thing in real time. This thing ran D4 and extended the trim line by a good 25% laterally. The no-name path also ran D4, thanks to Shane for this photo. This covered the road to the quarry, the marble quarry, about a quarter mile with just massive amounts of debris. And you can see here in these deeper snowpack areas, it took over 5 inches of water and about a 30% increase in total snow water equivalent. That's a 30% increase on a snowpack that was already over 3 meters deep. We had houses damaged. This is on Ouray County Road 361 as you head up towards the Camp Bird Mine. This is right below the Ribbon Ice Climb for those of you who know that area. On March 7th, we have 4 backcountry zones go to extreme danger. It's the first time we've had that happen. We have a fatal avalanche accident on Jones Pass. This was a thinner snowpack area, and we're looking at a 24% increase in total SWE. Our analysis determined this was likely triggered by cornice fall at the top. Unfortunately, a guide was killed in this event, but they were skiing with 12 clients, so we're fortunate this was not worse. Here's looking up at the crown. And then we have a lot of stuff going on along State Highway 91 on both sides of the ridge in the 10-mile range. These are clear illustrations that this avalanche cycle was not aspect dependent. This was running on all sides of the compass, at all elevations. So we've got avalanches running onto State Highway 91, rupturing glass lines, crossing Highway 91 north of Leadville for the first time that we're aware of. And then the sky chutes run with the Y chute running at 345 bearing cars. This is a pretty high profile avalanche on Peak 1. On the right is a before photo, on the left is the after photo, and you can see this newly cleared out path. And you can see the increase. Breckenridge is just getting hammered during this time. They're reporting 5.4 inches of storm water equivalent at this point, and over 5 feet of snow since the storms began. There's a really nice photo of that Peak 1 avalanche, and we'll revisit this one in a bit. March 6th and 7th, we've got more highly visible avalanches running in 10 Mile Canyon and I-70, taking out large sections of timber, throwing shrapnel into power lines. And then the Y chute runs and buries 3 cars. Here's what some of this aftermath looked like. If you look on the picture on the left here, the blue circle is highlighting a tire of a car that was near completely buried. The driver is fortunately able to escape out of this car by climbing through their side window. And here's the excavation of that car. So that tire I just showed you is the one that the blade's about to touch on the upper right-hand side. And again, some really scared motorists. Unfortunately, this didn't turn out worse. Some pretty handy machine work there, huh? I don't know what the insurance claim looked like on that one. So here's March 8th. Henderson Mine near Jones Pass is doing more control work, pulling out big avalanches. The Taylor River Lodge gets hit. This is nearby property, but this is the road between Almont and the Taylor Reservoir, south of Crested Butte, Gunnison County Road 742. This rarely produces avalanches of this size, but this was the kind of event we were seeing. We were starting to think about stuff that you never thought would run. We see avalanche control work on Loveland Pass put 20 feet of debris on US Highway 6 in the Black Widow path. Another D4 avalanches near Greg Mace Peak in Ashcroft created a new path, and we've got a massive cycle going on in the San Juans. This is 20 feet of debris on State Highway 141 over Slum Gully and Pass. This is some drone footage of County Road 2 north of Silverton. This is San Juan County. We know at least Boulder Gulch ran on March 8th. There are numerous avalanches on this road. It was carnage back there. We don't know the date of the rest of these avalanches, but we suspect at least one more ran on March 8th. A bunch ran during this time, and you can just see some of the damage that we came across in the aftermath of this stuff. This last little bit gives you an idea of what it was like to kind of clear that hallway. Overnight on the 8th, we've got continued heavy snowfall. It does lighten up a little bit on the 9th, but it was not the end of the avalanche cycle. So here we're taking out transmission lines and towers in Peru Creek. This is near the town of Montezuma in Summit County, near Keystone. Here we're at a near 38% increase in total snow water equivalent. If we thought March 8th was active, this is March 9th. Again, this is not cumulative. This is just what happened on March 9th that we know about. We have a fatal roof avalanche in Crested Butte. 2 people shoveling this roof were caught. 1 unfortunately did not survive. I'll cover State Highway 82 and Monitor Gulch here. This was our avalanche atlas prior to this event. That's Monitor Gulch, which was notably not on our avalanche atlas prior to this event. This was the start zone. And here's what Monitor Gulch looks like now. Now it is on our avalanche map. And we encourage residents to evacuate their homes. These are additional avalanches along State Highway 82, right near Twin Lakes, which put more debris on the highway, and this is what kind of trapped the folks that run the Grizzly Reservoir up in their house for 10 days until we were able to clear the highway. And then, of course, we have another D5 avalanche. This is the same ridge that Portchester slide ran on, and this time it really showed what it could do. So for those of you who know the area, this is everything from the 5 Fingers through the K-chutes. This ran over a mile wide, dropped around 3,200 feet, put around 200 feet of debris into Conundrum Creek, ran up the other side of the valley for a few hundred vertical feet before heading down valley. As this drone flies over, you're going to see a house come into view here that was damaged but not destroyed because of the protective wedge that you see coming into view that Art Mears designed here, and he'll speak a little bit more about that. Amazing that that house is still standing. Here's a before and after picture of just that. So I'm circling in both photos where the house was. So these were landscape altering events. This is one of the biggest avalanches that we know of in the cycle. This thing was a monster. So by March 10th, if we take a storm total, just snapshot, we're looking at 4 to 6 inches of water has fallen so far in the first 10 days of March. 4 to 6 feet of snow, and that's for just most mountain areas. The deepest portions of the Central Mountains are over double that. We're at a foot of water and 12 feet of snow in 10 days. And then our last pulse of this storm begins on March 11th. This favored the southern mountains with an additional 3 to 6 inches of water. You can see the steep uptick in snow water equivalent at the Slum Gully and Snowtail site, and this was just too much for the eastern San Juans. You can see a bunch of large activity, again in the Central Mountains, but a bunch now down in the San Juan Mountains. We have the sheriff's home completely destroyed while him and his daughters were sleeping in this house. Rescue crews trapped by another D4 avalanche. This is a before and after photo. Those colored dots just give you some reference points. So you can see what it looked like before the avalanche, and you can see what it looked like after. The house is gone. No one was killed in this avalanche. This is what it looks like from a flyover. Just completely obliterated. By March 13th, we are not done. We have more avalanches running in Lake City. We've got avalanches on the Cottonwood Pass Road out of Buena Vista. I hear some of those avalanches. We've got avalanches running in Ophir. Again, more on County Road 2 near Silverton. We have a house dusted near Trout Lake on Lizard Head Pass, size 3.5. This was taken from kind of the porch of that home. Scary event for the home taker. And this is the last D5 that we know about. This one ran on Garrett's Peak. This is, you can see the snowmass, top of one of the lips at the snowmass ski on the bottom left of the photo. This thing ran over 2 miles wide. It ran the vertical length in East Snowmass Creek. Super impressive slide. And a few days later, we're back to moderate danger. So it did its thing. Everything that did an avalanche wasn't going to run by you skiing or snowmobiling on it. By the following week, we were back to low danger, and this was pretty much the state of affairs through the rest of the spring. We had a couple spring storm events that bumped us back up into considerable, but that was pretty much it. The show was over. This really bolstered our snowpack quite a bit. Again, this was kind of a record-setting precipitation event. We're sitting at 117 to 159% of median, the highest numbers down in that southwest portion of the state. And this was the tally of damage. We had, fortunately, 3 people killed. We had 10 structures hit that we know of. 2 were occupied at the time. We damaged power lines. We damaged gas lines. We threatened municipal water supply outside of Aspen. We had 23 people caught in avalanche, including 10 people that were driving. So was this an historic avalanche cycle? Well, this was certainly nothing that we've ever seen. Anyone on staff it was all unanimous that we've never seen anything like this in our careers. So we started to call some people who've been around a lot longer than us, and sure enough, they hadn't seen anything like this either. So we knew it was historic. How historic, we don't know yet. We're still trying to grapple with this. This is just a really cool photo of the old timers going over Red Mountain Pass, and you can see what they would use for tunnels back in the old days. They didn't let avalanche debris stop them, they just tunneled right through. So the Disney path on US 40 between Berthoud, right near Berthoud Pass, ran in 1957 with the famous kind of Disney chute which killed the photographer. This is the first time that we put snow on the road in the Disney path since 1957, so 60-something year event. We look at the Perry Peak avalanche. Here's a person standing in the debris. This did run. This is the one just west of Twin Lakes. This did run really big in 1962, killed 7 people and 2 unfortunate deer. So again, 60-something year time frame. We look at some of these other avalanches like Peak 1, and this was widely reported to be a new avalanche path. You go back and look in the archival photos long enough, and sure enough, that avalanche path was there in 1899. But it's been a long time since that thing was cleared out. This is the Rose Lime Kiln. This is in Hinsdale County near Lake City. This thing was built in 1881 and stood in place until this cycle. So we're looking at 120, 130 year events for these types of things. We know avalanches have run in a 10-mile canyon before. This obviously predates I-70 being in there when the railway was the only thing that ran through. But here's some folks clearing the railway debris from the big snow year of 1898, 1899. So again, 120-plus year event. We had over 1,000 avalanches reported to CAIC in 2 weeks. 87 of those were size 4 or bigger. That's compared to 24 in the 8 years prior to that. True to our suspicions, no one triggered a big size 3 or more. People were not doing this. This took inches and inches of water, feet and feet of snow, or large explosives. We have at least 3 D5 avalanches. We've been debating this quite a bit. I think as we go back and do more volume calculations and look at it, the number of D5s, avalanches that get classified D5 will grow. And we're trying to count avalanches in different ways. This is some of the work Ron Simonois is doing, looking at satellite imagery. He can pick out stuff that's done vegetative damage. So these are size D3s or bigger. And Ron's initial preliminary estimates are we're over 4,000. So the amount of avalanches that we have recorded right now is 25% of less of what really happened out there. So why was this cycle so different? We see big snow events. This year, our snowpack was relatively deep and relatively strong. So in a typical Colorado snowpack, if we started to see 3, 4, 5 inches of water, we would see avalanches, but we'd see them much earlier in the cycle, and they would be much smaller in size because of it. The fact that our snowpack was pretty strong, it allowed it to take quite a punishment, but this was just too much. And so when things started to fail, they failed in catastrophic and historic ways. We did start to notice avalanches ramping up as we approached, give or take, this is really rough, about 20% increase in snow water equivalent snowpack on the ground, regardless of snow depth. The deeper snowpack areas, those that were 3 and 4 meters, took more like 30%, but then they ended up producing much bigger and catastrophic avalanches. So I think thoughts for next time is I want to keep a closer eye on these looks and total increases in snow water equivalent on the ground. Start paying really close attention to our scales early in the cycle. And think if there's better ways we can start to communicate to counties, municipalities, things like that, where we were having counties reaching out to us. It's harder to kind of get the word out a lot of the times now. Landlines are becoming less prevalent. So we're thinking about how we can interface with towns, cities, roadways, county roads, that kind of thing as we go forward. This is a video animation of all of those maps. So this is cumulative. This just shows you what our small crew of 20 was trying to grapple with in these first 2 weeks of March. The size of these avalanches was historic. The spatial extent was statewide pretty much. And that combination made this thing one for the record books. It was just an amazing cycle to live through. We didn't sleep a lot, but as we got on the tail end of this and caught our breath, upon reflection, it was kind of a cool thing to have happen during your career. That's all I've got. I think I've got a little time for some questions, and so I'm happy to answer what I can.
Thanks, Brian. We do have time for a few questions. Down in front.
Brian, what can you say about the winds during the storm? I know it's highly variable with time and terrain, but can you make any general statements about the general wind?
I don't know if I can, Art. I'd have to go back and look. There was certainly a lot of drifting snow, but I think the drifting was dwarfed as a factor by just the load alone. And I think what makes me say that is that we were seeing avalanches run on all aspects and all elevations. So I won't discount the fact that loading played some factor into this, but when we were seeing, 10, 12 inches of snow water, I think I'm going to go out on a limb and say that was probably the driving factor, but I'd have to look closer at wind, and I think it was probably variable by location.
Any other questions? Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, he was asking if the Sangres just missed out on this cycle or if we just don't have any data. The Sangres got a bunch of snow, so they were not left out of the loading event. We just don't have as much data coming from the Sangres to kind of fill in that gap. So again, we know there was some avalanche activity in the Sangres, but if you are out that way, please let me know. We'd like to fill in that gap. I think just the load that they received alone, I suspect there's more avalanches out there than we know about.
Okay, thanks, Brian.